Welcome to the Ronald and Nelani lecture hosted by the Charles Redd Center for Western Studies and the Department of History. My name's Jay Buckley. I'm the director of the Redd Center, and we welcome you to this excellent presentation on Framing Nature by Dr. Yolonda Young. We'll first have a prayer by Amy Carlin, then an introduction of the lecture by Leslie Hadfield from the History Department, and then an introduction to the speaker by the Associate Director, Brendan Rensing.
Well, I'm excited to be here today. This lecture is named after Ronald and Nelani Walker. Ronald Warren Walker, lived from 1939 to 2016 and had a very important career in history here at BYU and in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was a BYU grad, and he got his Bachelor of Science here at BYU, and he ended up going on a mission to the church's Southern States mission, and after returning, he ended up doing a master's at Stanford University, and that is where he met and married Nelani Midgley. And while in California, he began teaching in the LDS Seminary and Institute programs and acted as the director of the program in San Francisco. The Walkers then moved to Salt Lake City, where Ron pursued his doctorate at the University of Utah while teaching in the university's Institute program, which is quite a feat to do. In 1976, he was recruited by Leonard Arrington to join the historical department of the church, which was growing at the time. And he very quickly distinguished himself as for his writing and his meticulous research. He was known for having an encyclopedic knowledge of primary historical documents, mastery of context, and charitable treatment of subjects. And I'll talk about that in a moment. In 1980, so just 4 years after he was recruited to work for the church historical department, he was brought down to BYU into the newly created Joseph Fielding Smith Institute at BYU, where he became a professor. And he really found mentoring and teaching students to be rewarding. A lot of his work, he wrote 8 books and over 50 journal articles and a number of other articles, and they treated church history in a balanced and sensitive way, especially when dealing with some controversial topics. And I just wanted to, he wrote his maybe more known book, Wayward Saints, and then also about the Mountain Meadows Massacre with Rick Turley and Glenn Leonard, which was published in 2008. And I thought his words and thoughts about how we deal with this kind of history is important for us today. He said, "There is no alternative other than the truth, for truth will come out. And we have to, the demons will not be exorcised until the public is convinced that there has been full disclosure and the hard questions about the massacre have been asked and answered. And the asking and answering of questions will always be the most difficult part of the process." But he said that knowing the truth and learning from it is one of the best things that we can do with this history. And so we're excited to have this event in his honor and to honor his pursuit of the truth. Thank you.
Okay, this is the last of the introductions. Yolonda Young is professor of geography and environmental studies at California State University, San Bernardino. She holds a bachelor's in anthropology from Florida State, a master's in earth sciences from Montana State University, and a PhD in geography from Arizona State University. At CSU San Bernardino, she teaches courses on environmental geography, public lands, GIS, cultural geography, tourism, recreation, and other topics. She is active in a number of professional organizations and does lots of public outreach. Currently, she serves as the chair of the Protected Area Specialty Group of the American Association of Geographers. In addition to publishing a long list of academic articles, she co-edited a 2018 collection, The American Environment Revisited, Environmental Historical Geographies of the United States. And last year, she published with the University of Nebraska Press the book that she'll be speaking about today, Framing Nature, the Creation of an American Icon at the Grand Canyon. Some congratulations are due, as Framing Nature was recently awarded one of the most prestigious honors in her field, the 2025 J.B. Jackson Prize from the American Association of Geographers. I'll also note that Young's has brought a few copies of the book, and if you'd like to purchase one, she'll be hanging around a little bit afterwards and can sign. And I think she's set up for PayPal, maybe, or cash. I'd also note that at 11:50, if some of you students need to get up and go to your next classes, please do. We may already be into the Q&A at that point, so just try to leave quietly, but you're allowed to leave when you have to get to your next class. So we're really happy to have Professor Youngs here. Please join me in welcoming her.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. Let me make sure I get set up with that. Okay. Again, thank you for having me here today. My name is Yolonda Youngs. My students who go into the field with me call me Dr. Yo, so you can also do that. Thank you so much. I just want to start off with saying thank you so much to the Red Center and to my wonderful hosts here. I really appreciate it. It's a wonderful and warm welcome. Specifically, I want to make sure that I thank Brendan, who's just done a tremendous job of making sure this is a smooth process, Amy and Jay as well. And again, I want to thank you, students, faculty, if we have any community members here, for making time in your schedules and coming to this event. So what am I going to talk about today? The day and the talk are going to be a little brisk. I tend to move through images. The whole book is about looking at the canyon and the visual images of the canyon. So to start off, I'll give a little introduction about why I wrote this book. Then we'll go behind the scenes to learn about the images that I'm talking about, how they were produced. I think that's an important part of the story. We'll talk about the view makers, the people who make these images, and then I'll give you just a little glance into some of the processes that go behind sort of the social construction nature is what we're talking about here, and I'll talk about what that means, and then we'll wrap up with kind of a weird question: where's the real Grand Canyon? All right. So already I've been so wonderfully and bountifully introduced, but I will just say a little bit. I'm an environmental and geospatial researcher. I am a very broadly trained scholar as well. So I do cultural historical work, I do environmental and physical earth sciences based work, and I also do geospatial and GIS tech work. My research also spans across much of the Western United States. Really, a lot of my work comes under the banner of long-term environmental monitoring. I maintain sites around the Western U.S., including Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, Channel Islands right off the coast of California, where I teach a national parks course every spring, and my students go with me for several days, and we do some habitat monitoring there. The Grand Canyon, which we'll hear about today. And then I also keep a close eye on UNESCO biosphere sites and World Heritage sites, which are an important part of my international work that I do, right? So much of the time, this map is front and center in my mind, right? For those of you, I know we have a variety of backgrounds and interests here. I'm a trained geographer, so I think in terms of spatial approaches and maps. So what we're looking at here is, of course, the United States, but we're looking at national park units, so the whole system across the United States. My work broadly draws on experiences that I've had either doing research or collecting data from 204 of the 433 units and from all 50 states. So that's part of what is the information in the book that I have produced, and also some of the things I'll talk about today. As Brandon was so nice to mention, a great thing that's happened is that I've gotten this wonderful book prize, so I'm tooting my horn here, but I'm also doing it for a specific reason. The Jackson Prize is one of the highest honors in my discipline. I'm deeply honored to have received it, but I'm particularly honored to receive this award because I structured the book and focused it exactly for the kind of thing that I'm getting rewarded for, which is a book that meets hopefully the scholarly interest as well as the public interest. And in fact, this is one of my last book tours of 2025, or book talks. I've been doing talks all around the country throughout this year at bookstores and all kinds of different events to try to promote not just the book, but more importantly, critically thinking about the environment through a spatial lens. I'm following other geographers and other scholars who do this kind of work in terms of thinking about public geographies. So very intentionally reaching out from where we do our research and our scholarly work and really trying to present those results to the public in a way that's not only digestible, but hopefully useful. William Wyckoff wrote, "We are so well positioned to produce public geographies, it is more important to do so than ever before." And I really feel that, especially in these years. So thinking about what I'm talking about today, it's a big book. You can see some copies down there for those of you who I know we're live streaming too, for those of you who are here. I can only present so much, but numerically, right, I want you to know, and I know there's students in the room, this is a mixed method approach. There's a lot of quantitative work and a lot of qualitative work involved. Just looking at the numbers, my book covers about 153 years of history from 1869 to 2022. Can't talk about all that here, but I'm going to give you a slice of it. I looked at over 1,000 images, so 1,400 postcards and photographs. So that's part of the larger work that I'm synthesizing here for you today. I also love working in big spaces. I already told you about some of my field sites, right? Grand Canyon itself for the national park is 1.2 million acres. I've considered, 277 river miles of Colorado. It's a longer river, but that's the stretch that's in the park at least. And the work stretches across 4 different states as well. The images, so there's lots of images that I looked at, and I'll tell you about what I did with that. But in terms of what's in the book itself, 79 photographs, 35 illustrations, 36 original and historic maps. And then there's a nice little appendices back there too with some graphs and other things, right? So I walk you from early expeditions into the Colorado River, Thomas Moran, John Wesley Powell, and others along those lines. I move into the mass tourism era of Grand Teton National Park, Grand Canyon National Park, and then through a lot of the modern recreation as well. So it's, again, sort of a sweeping 153 years. And today I'm going to present just a portion of that and give you a glimpse at some of these other things. So I mentioned that I've been doing a lot of public talks, and when I do this, I've been doing podcasts and radio interviews, bookstore talks, talks like this at universities. Oftentimes I get the question of, why did I write this book? Well, it's the Grand Canyon, right? How many people in this room have heard of the Grand Canyon? Yeah, there you go. Good. How many people have been to the Grand Canyon? Physically step foot. Oh, look at that, my Utah audience. Wonderful. Okay, so for those of you online, that's a lot of hands that went up. So this is wonderful, right? So a lot of people here have heard about it, but a lot of people all around the country and all around the world have heard about the Grand Canyon and a lot of places in it. One of the interesting things is it's not the only one. There's a lot of Grand Canyons out there, right? So in the world of AI, I dipped just lightly into it and asked, just a simple Google search, are there other Grand Canyons? And yes, there's a lot of them. One of the interesting things that I experienced early on is separating my work in the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone National Park from the Grand Canyon of the Colorado, right? Just for a couple of examples. So there's a lot of Grand Canyons, but there's something about this Grand Canyon that makes it really distinct, that one in Arizona. It's also really popular. I don't need to tell you that here in Utah, you know it. But nationally, this is a really popular park. In 2024, 4.9, a little bit over 4.9 million people. You could see before you the graph showing visitation. There's some distinct dips here for national events like World War I, World War II, and of course, COVID. We saw a dip and then a surge. But generally, that interest in visiting this park has only risen over time. So the Grand Canyon is a lot of things, right? It is beautiful. It's inspirational. It can be dangerous. It's unfortunately a place that a lot of people have challenges with the heat or with the terrain. It is definitely a very managed landscape. It is a geologic wonder. It is so many things, but it is really an icon, right? And just seeing your hands today gave me the sense of that, right? When I was first starting to look at this project, it took about 15 years to complete this whole project. And when I was starting to look at this, I was talking to people and I was saying, the same things I just asked you all here. Have you been to the Grand Canyon? Have you heard of it? Those kind of questions. And I was looking through the newspaper one day and came across this kind of curious article and asking which Grand Canyon is the real Grand Canyon, right? And the article's focus at this point was, and this was 2008, was debating which Grand Canyon had a more authentic nature, is how I interpreted it. Would it be the Grand Canyon Village, managed by the National Park Service on the South Rim, or another South Rim location, the Skywalk at Grand Canyon West? And both of these are very iconic, and I will talk about it. But I found that to be a very interesting and curious part of the experience that, again, inspired me to write this book. Right? So we'll do a little experiment right here for those of you in the room and those of you online. If you've been to the Grand Canyon, think about where you stood, right? So think about it in your mind's eye. You can close your eyes for this part too. Sometimes it helps. It's bright in this room, right? What's in your mind's eye? Where are you standing? What are you looking out over? What are you standing around? I'm going to guess that for some of you, it looked maybe a little bit like this. Right? You can open your eyes if they were closed, right? Maybe you were standing on the edge, maybe not so scary an edge, but maybe you were standing on an edge like this, looking out. Maybe for some of you, you had a fuller image in your mind, right? And something really distinct, right? How many of you in the room here had yourself standing, or you pictured yourself standing on a rim? Put up your hands. Okay, great. How many folks had yourself standing by the river? Oh, interesting. All right, we're going to talk later. That's good. Okay. It's kind of something to think about here in terms of when we see that Grand Canyon standing on the rim with those really distinct colors, reds and oranges, that blue sky, those puffy clouds, right? That's a really common vision to have in our heads. And in fact, Northern Arizona University did a study a few years ago, and they asked visitors to identify which park services and facilities they used and to rank them. And overwhelmingly, visitors ranked simply the canyon overlooks, this thing right here that I'm showing you right now, right? Seeing the canyon. They also asked respondents to report on the highlight of their visit, and their first thing they said was simply the canyon itself. Wow, right? I came across, between that newspaper article I showed you and this, imagine yourself faced with, or maybe like a research paper, but think about a really long one that turns into a book, right? You're faced with that article asking which is the real Grand Canyon, and then you come across a study that says just going there, just seeing this place is the #1 thing. We have all these national parks, but this one people are going to just to stand there and look at it. That's pretty fascinating. Vision and seeing is really important for this particular space, right? So let's go behind the scenes in terms of the images that have been produced over time and what people were seeing. Just to give you, I know I've got a really well-informed audience here, but just to remind you about parts of the Grand Canyon, it's really big, right? If we look at it in terms of its physical space, its physical geography, the national park itself, 1.2 million acres, 277 river miles of the Colorado River, that's just in the national park. And very importantly, the North Rim and the South Rim are not the same elevations. North Rim's about 1,000 feet higher than the South Rim. And so that makes for distinctly different environments. And of course, as we move down through the canyon, through what I call the mid-canyon section, we have lots of different microenvironments there. And of course, down along the riparian corridor of the Colorado River, it's very different as well. put over that a layer of the regional context. And when I'm talking about this, I'm thinking about all the different ways that are managed in terms of the landscapes, right? So we've got National Park Service that you see here, but you have a lot of other national park units throughout the area. There's also BLM, there's U.S. Forest Service. We have many communities, specifically a lot of the tribal communities around this area. And then, of course, we have private towns and communities along there as well. Again, for the students in the room, just a couple more slides here. This work took 15 years, so that was a long time. Don't do a paper that takes 15 years, right? This is a book, right? But I want to give you a sense that it wasn't just me sitting there clicking away on my computer for 15 years. A very big part of this book is based in physically me going to the canyon and really getting to know it. Most of the images, in fact, all the images that I considered for the book, I went to that exact same place and found that exact same place and retook that image through a process called repeat photography. I'll talk about that later. So there was a lot of field work. I hiked around the north and the south rims. I've hiked in and out of the canyon. I've had my equipment carried by mules, which was awesome. I highly suggest if you have a lot of heavy equipment to get mules to do it if possible. I also did a 3-week river trip down the Colorado River. Along with that, I also did archival research. Some of the national park units have great archives. This is one of them. I also did archival research at places around the country, libraries and archives. So what you're seeing here is really a blending of methods. This is a lot of applied research, landscape observation. I also integrated some informed decisions and, conversations with park managers. They were informal, but I also talked to a lot of visitors as well. And again, that process of repeat photography was really informative for me, where I would take a historic picture, such as the postcard you see in front of you, and I would try to find that exact same spot and take it exactly as that photographer did in the past. And then I would compare those images. And through that kind of analysis, a lot can be revealed, right? So some imagery here from, again, hiking, driving, hiking around, as well as driving around, as well as hiking into and out of the canyon, floating down it for 3 weeks, and talking to lots and lots of people, right? So that was a big part of those 15 years. And through that work, at one point, I actually pulled up and stopped during a sabbatical, and I re-envisioned the region that I was talking about. And it at its core is Grand Canyon National Park, but really what I'm proposing here is a new idea for the greater Grand Canyon region. And this is an original map from the book. And notably, I expanded the boundaries of what I was thinking about from all the way over in New Mexico, up to the boundary of Utah and Arizona, northern Arizona, and Nevada as well. So it's a very large area here that is part of that greater Grand Canyon region. And I feel that that's really important to consider that physical, cultural, and those environmental aspects, all right? So how about tracing the process? I talked about archival research. There's lots of ways to do it. But let's talk about the things that I actually looked at in terms of the documents. You will see some of these are reproduced in the book as well. But when I went to not only the National Park Service archives at Grand Canyon National Park, but then other really great archives around the country, I actually looked at not only the images, but the production records behind them. And that was very informative. I'll explain that here as I move along. All right. Okay, so just to focus you, we're talking about 1,000+ images, right? So I looked at 410 postcards from 3 different manufacturers. Those postcards were the most common form of correspondence early on, right? So from 1909, 1955, thinking about postcards. I also look at Arizona Highways photographs. If you haven't seen Arizona Highways, it's a terrific publication, and it produces a lot of pictures of the Grand Canyon. It started out as a highway engineers magazine, but now it is a very popular magazine for tourism in the state. And I looked at over 1,000 images in Arizona Highways, and that brought me up to a more contemporary context. What did I do when I looked at these pictures? All right, so imagine yourself, you're sitting there, you grad students, right? Or undergrad students too, anyone can do this, faculty, right? You have a picture of the Grand Canyon in front of you, and every time I looked at one of those pictures, I looked at what were the subjects in it. Were there mules? Were there people? Were there buildings? Were there roads? Okay, I had a big matrix that I set up, and I put, it's all ones and zeros. 1, yes, mule. 0, no mule, right? So imagine that, slaving over a hot computer for days in an archive, right? As I did that, I started to realize that some themes or sub-subjects were more frequent than others. So I highlighted those as themes in the work. And then being a spatial thinker and a geographer, I also noticed there's a real spatial bias. That's something that scholars Wyckoff and Dilsaver pointed out. And I found that here in that some places in the canyon were represented more frequently than others in the images. At first, it may not sound that appealing or that surprising to you, but wait until you see the results as we go through this talk. So I also thought about the canyon not just horizontally, which you can see in the lower map here, but also vertically, thinking about those rim, mid-river, or mid-canyon and river locations, right? So again, there's a lot in this book. It's a big book, 153 years. The talk today, I'm going to focus primarily on that middle part of the book and those middle chapters I'm highlighting here. Right. So let's go behind the scenes. I found this was very useful to look at who created these images and potentially why they created them. And these are the people that I called the view makers, the ones who actually created the postcards, right? So for this work, I looked at 3 postcard manufacturers, Detroit Publishing Company, the Fraser Photo Cards, and also the Kirk-Tyke photo cards. These were the 3 most popular postcard producers of their times. And when I say that, I know maybe you're not thinking about postcards that much right now, but postcards were the text messages. I'm not even going to say the email. They were the text messages. They were maybe better, even the Instagram, right? They were visual, they were quick, there was not a lot of text, but they were widely distributed. And these 3 manufacturers were producing the most postcards for their eras and the most Grand Canyon postcards. So they were really great ones for me to look at. I also wanted to think about the production and manufacturing process in terms of thinking about the creation of these, right? So postcards and the postcard creation process historically is a little different than it is now, but traditionally it was one photographer getting a short list of locations or suggestions from whoever was going to purchase these cards, right? So imagine yourself, you're a photographer, you've got an assignment, you're going to go to the Grand Canyon, and it's going to say, we would like 3 pictures of the Grand Canyon from the South Rim, make them scenic. Thank you. Please send them back. Oh my God, did I mention how big this place was, right? Okay, so that's a tough assignment, but that photographer would go out and from this huge landscape, they would select a few places that they would take those pictures. Something similar, this is obviously not the Grand Canyon, but you get the idea of a photographer in the field, right? They would take that picture and then they would send those pictures back to the manufacturing companies, which I'm going to show you here in a moment. And they were companies, factories, large factories that would make these postcards. But they would send notes. So they would send some textual notes that would say, you know, do this or do that. But they would also actually sometimes send back images and they would change those. So if you look closely at this image, and hopefully you can see it, you can see maybe some scribble there above the buildings. Again, obviously I'm not showing you the Grand Canyon yet, but I want you to get the idea that in these scribbles, the photographers could say, you know, change colors or add this or take that out. In that process, they could do lots and lots of different things. They could add color, they could add subjects, they could remove things, they could move things around from one place to another. And to give you a sense of that in just sort of a short scope here, here we have a 2 images. This is a William Henry Jackson photograph. Very notably, he contributed a lot of his images to Detroit and became a major part of that company. And then here's a recolored version of the exact same image. So you can see some of the choices that were made if you go from just that black and white image to colorizing it. And that was very important. But there's more, right? These images were being produced in massive, massive factories in Chicago and Detroit primarily. And here you get a postcard image of one of them. The noted here is the largest postcard factory in the world. And this is showing the Kirk-Tyke postcard factory. And inside these factories, there were lots and lots of people, some of them with really tiny paintbrushes, but lots of them doing lots of important work. And many of these were skilled and trained artists who were working for these postcard companies. So you had not only artists that were retouching, as they called it, the photographs, you also had a massive part of the factory was doing the printing itself. And let's not forget, they were sold as well. There were postcard stores that simply sold postcards for collectors, which a lot of people did. And then finally, people purchased these. Sometimes people put them into albums, which they kept, and they used them as sort of just something to look at in the living room, maybe in the evenings. But lots of other folks, of course, traveled and purchased postcards. And on the back of those cards, or sometimes on the front, they would write their opinions and their experiences. And so you have this global process that's happening in terms of creating these images, the people behind these images, and then this massive movement of these images that they are distributed and circulated around the world, right? So what's the effects of this? Well, this is something I call editing nature. And here's where it got fascinating for me. Again, for all of you, so many of you put your hands up here. Think about, again, when you were at the Grand Canyon, right? Did anyone look for a sunset view? One person, two people looked at sunset views. Jay, could I get some postcards, please? We have, for those of you, just to make it a little perky in here, I have goodies for you, right? If you raise your hand there, please raise your hand again. We have postcards that have the cover of the book, and on the back it has a QR code that takes you to a discount code you can buy, a little bit of information about the book itself, right? So for those of you who, or those few who look for a sunset view, think about your process of trying to find that sunset view. One of the things that I thought was interesting is as I was hanging around the South Rim on the National Park Service side, as it was becoming close to sunset, people started rushing for the doors. I was in this restaurant, right? And the screens on the little monitors and TVs all of a sudden flipped over to these shots of showing us Yavapai Point, best view for sunrise, or maybe Hopi Point, best view for sunset. Right? And so this promotion of where should we go was really getting people excited. They wanted to go for the buses or get out to that special perfect spot and get their moment with the rising sun or the setting sun of the Grand Canyon. And true, it's beautiful, right? But I was thinking to myself, well, this is hilarious. Everything's really, just go outside. I mean, it's the Grand Canyon, it's gorgeous, right? But yet there were some places that were noted as being particularly beautiful. And I found it over the course of this imagery, just to kind of show you the end result here, is that those places that were promoted as the best sunrise or sunset are the exact same places that were being promoted as the best sunrise and sunset over 150 years ago. And they are, again, shown through the imagery that I came across, right? So one of the points I want to make to here is that the images that these people have taken in the past and created in the past, as well as the images we take today with our, phones or cameras, they can have some really important effects in terms of thinking about environmental perceptions and how that canyon might be managed, right? So let me give you some examples. Here's what I call in the chapter on editing nature, and I talk about this process. Here we're looking at a postcard from Kirktyke. Again, remember, this is one of the most popular postcards out there. And if there's anything that you might notice that looks a little different about this postcard, and I think it's okay if people say words. What do you see in this postcard that looks a little funny? Yes, please. You don't see the canyon, that's good. Postcard for that person, please, thank you. Yeah, what else?
Don't really see that much green in the Grand Canyon.
You don't see that much green. Okay, this is a postcard and I have stickers. Can we also get stickers up here in the front? Yeah, up here in the front, please. Raise your hand. Okay, so excellent, right? So you don't see the canyon. That's important. We're going to talk about that in a second. But for this one, I want to highlight the green, right? This is a postcard that has been what the company Kirktyke called color embellished. Remember all those painters and factories with those tiny little paintbrushes? They were making this place more green because the feedback that they were getting is that the canyon was not green enough, right? And I found that in the documentation. This also is showing us an image right after the Civilian Conservation Corps had moved through Grand Canyon National Park, and they did this for a lot of national parks, and they beautified it basically by planting a lot of extra shrubbery and all that, right? But it should look a little weird to you, at least by our modern eyes. We're talking about a high desert landscape that certainly does have green vegetation, but perhaps maybe not that much. Okay, the really weird one is the water, all right? Who wants to tell me what looks interesting or strange about this? Yes, ma'am.
It's too blue. It's not that blue.
You all, boy, I did not give you notes ahead of time. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we get a sticker and a postcard up here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so blue, right? Blue. So these postcards, let me remind you of the timeline here. These postcards were created before any of the Colorado River was dammed. The Colorado River would not have looked like this, but you see these nice turquoise blue, and it's always consistently a really bright, consistent turquoise blue river that's moving through this area. And I found that as far back as the Detroit postcards, and here I'm showing you one of the maps from the book and some of the locations with that orange dot of where I found this postcard, and the Kirktyke postcard as well, right? So again, this was in an era of dam building, right? This is in an era where if we saw that, in fact, this is what the river would have looked like. It would have been a warm, silt-laden river, and it definitely would have had more of a brown or at least a darker tinge to it. And yet that's the postcard we were seeing, right? So again, this sort of editing of nature, potentially postcard producers were doing this. I don't think anything nefarious. I think they were doing it simply to create a new product. But as they were doing it, they were creating new products, but they were also influencing potentially what people thought. And they were certainly trying to attract audiences from the East that might have been more comfortable seeing rivers and lakes from the East Coast, right? Also, you know, they could get away with it because if you're standing on the south rim of the Grand Canyon, there's not a lot of places that you could see the Colorado River. In fact, the Park Service has added this new image here. They've added a sign that points out exactly where you could see the Grand Canyon. And if you notice, they say, find the Colorado River, and they give you a little hint here. It's right there, and they point it out, right? So it's a little, you could see where perhaps maybe people who had not taken a mule ride down to the bottom, and certainly a lot of these postcards were produced before there was raft trips, maybe people wouldn't be as aware of it. How about the geology? It turns out that they really changed the colors as well, or they at least accentuated the colors. So here you're seeing several images. These are postcards on this side, right? And so we're looking here at a postcard from 1905, a postcard from 1909, and then here's my recent repeat photograph from 2008, where I went and stood at the exact same place. So again, this is the process behind a lot of the results that I found in my book. And here you could see that changing of the colors. And in fact, emphasizing reds and oranges was very important as they colorized these images. And you could see that as well as maybe the vegetation changes through time. But the most shocking thing that I saw was the biodiversity or the lack thereof. And I call this section the call of the domestic as opposed to the call of the wild, right? When we think about the Grand Canyon, it is an incredibly biodiverse place. 91 species of mammals in Grand Canyon National Park itself. It has a higher mammalian species diversity than Yellowstone National Park, another one of my big sites, right? So there are certainly lots of birds, there are lots of mammals, there are lots of amphibians and reptiles. And they are throughout all of the different parts of the greater Grand Canyon region that I talk about. And they are very frequently seen by visitors who go to national parks. How many of you here have seen a raven at Grand Canyon National Park? Okay, good. Or the greater Grand Canyon. How many folks here, I'm just curious, have seen a bighorn sheep or an elk? Yeah, good. Okay, great. Thank you. So lots of different wildlife, to the point that the National Park Service, which I love this, they've gotten a really great social media feed going. they've come out with all kinds of warning signs and hopefully visitor information to encourage visitors to understand how dangerous getting close to wildlife can be. But there's that density of wildlife and biodiversity, and yet shockingly in the postcards, that was not reflected. Instead, what I found from looking at over 400 postcards were the only sort of wildlife that I found were horses and mules. Potentially, this might be the one dog that I saw in 150 years, if you can make out right there in the front. But mostly it was deer, mule, horses, and maybe that one dog. Right. So, and they were often seen, even the deer were seen in domesticated situations such as this, where the deer are sort of being hand-fed by visitors. And again, this is no accident. When I looked at postcard imagery, I could reconstruct part of that by going to the archives and again, looking at the production process and the documents. So here's a really popular postcard. When I say popular, I mean, I can tell in the archives that it was popular because they show the production records, and the really popular ones they reprinted every year. Again, they're looking for a new image, so they might change the colors just a little bit. But this one, they took two great iconic things and they combined them together. So here was the original postcard that showed a Grand Canyon scenic shot, and then they added to it a mule in the side here. And when I looked in the production records, I found this reef-touched photo, as they called it in the production. And then I found the records that were showing that, in fact, it was the head of a mule from a whole different postcard that they had kind of ripped off and pasted, if you will, into this Grand Canyon image. And those of you here in the room and perhaps online, if you look closely, you can see some, what I always thought was kind of creepy stuff. It looks like little tendrils of mule hair or something off to the bottom there. But you can see that they were kind of scraping it, the image itself, and trying to glue those two things together, right? So I think there was an interplay here of some sort between the images that were, again, very popular, very well-known, distributed around the country and the world, and maybe how they might have been influencing or been influenced by park management policies, right? So we're talking about an era here from the 1930s to the 1970s, for example, to just take one point in time, when predator-prey dynamics were very different in the United States. Starting in 1915, the U.S. Department of Agriculture started to fund wildlife control policies where they were actively hunting and killing predators such as coyotes, wolves, and other predators like that. There wasn't a biological survey of the national parks until 1929, started by George Melendez-Wright. And in fact, in 1931, there was an established U.S. Division of Predator Control and Rodent Control created. So when we think about why are we seeing more deer and these kind of creatures as opposed to more predators, that might be one reason. Also think about the popularity of mules and mule rides in the Grand Canyon. Mules originally potentially came to the Grand Canyon. They were introduced species that were part of the mining operations and perhaps allowed to roam around the canyon afterwards, or turned loose as tourism became more popular and more profitable than mining. And over time, these mule rides really gained incredible popularity. And we can see that in the images over and over again, not only in the postcards, but here I'm showing you Arizona Highways photographs. And again, I looked at every image of the Grand Canyon for many decades, and over again, I saw the popularity of these mule rides reappointed multiple times in those images, right? But it wasn't just nature that was being edited. It was also culture. It was also the human part of it. And in this part of our consideration, I want you to think about who goes to the Grand Canyon, who lives there, who maybe calls this place home or a homeland in a variety of ways. And of course, living there since time immemorial and with very strong ties to various parts of the canyon are the 11 traditionally associated tribes. And here you're seeing maps showing the traditional territories of Grand Canyon tribes, as well as some of the current tribal reservations around Grand Canyon National Park. So certainly that is a major part of thinking about that human imprint on the landscape. But through the course of this study, I also traced what was going on at the Grand Canyon in terms of who was managing that and who was using that space as well. all the way from Grand Canyon National Monument in 1908. And here we're looking at a time where the U.S. Forest Service was managing this area. It was mostly Anglo settlers and entrepreneurs and Native American residents. And then we shift in 1919 to not only becoming a national park, but really moving away from, to put it very lightly, moving away from that tribal affiliation and recognition and tribal peoples forcefully being removed from the canyon. So moving from the U.S. Forest Service and that previous context to now, as it became a national park, the U.S. National Park Service is managing this area, Santa Fe Railroad and the Fred Harvey Company coming in as major concessionaires. And that brings us a little closer to that modern Grand Canyon experience that we know. And again, thinking about where is the real Grand Canyon, this is some of that source material in what parts of the Grand Canyon do the National Park Service manage. I also want to remind you of that graph I showed you earlier. Lots of people were going to the Grand Canyon. This is what's called the mass tourism era of the Grand Canyon visitation. So as park visitors and numbers are rising, we're also seeing a greater popularity of using lodges and experiencing those kinds of facilities. But these are not just restaurants and not just hotels. They're what geographers call cultural landscapes. And those cultural landscapes have a lot of meaning and importance imbued in them as well. As Cosgrove and Daniels remind us in one of their works, cultural landscapes are also cultural images. They are a pictorial way of representing, structuring, and symbolizing our surroundings, right? So they could be represented in materials such as in rocks and the trees and the place around us, but they can also be represented in photographs and postcards, as I do here. So that winds you up for thinking about what were some of the weirdest postcards and pictures that I came across, right? And this is another question I get quite frequently. And in fact, I saw enough of a thread of this throughout the years of working on this that I started to talk about this visual shorthand. Earlier on in the talk, someone said, and I think it was you, who said, one of the weird things about the postcards was that the Grand Canyon wasn't in it, right? Well, early on, that is kind of weird, right? They were trying to sell the Grand Canyon, so those earlier postcards from like the early 1900s, the Grand Canyon was front and center. Postcard after postcard had the Grand Canyon in it. But then as we move through this mass tourism period, again, sort of post-World War II, certainly moving into the 60s, 70s, 80s, people know about the Grand Canyon. And certainly an image such as this from that post-World War II era, people know about the Grand Canyon. Now, they might be trying to sell the lodges and the other facilities at the Grand Canyon. So this postcard really drove me nuts for years. And if you look closely, potentially one of the strange things is in the background here, and this picture of the Grand Canyon, which looks really weird to me. Over time, I went in, and this is at the Bright Angel Lodge. And I went in there and I tried to find it. And this is so a lot of you have been to Grand Canyon. If you've gone into Bright Angel Lodge, it's a little gift shop. And if you look around, you won't see the Grand Canyon very easily. You can still see the fireplace. You can still see parts of it. It's a Fred Harvey sort of museum and gift shop now. And I would go in and I would take this postcard and I would ask the people who were working there, hey, help me out. Let's all look at this postcard and try to look at this picture and try to see it through the window. And eventually, this is the picture that you could see out the window, or at least the visual that you can see out the window. The Grand Canyon's there. You could see it on the very edge. But that's actually more of what you can see. And you can imagine that if they pasted that into the window, it maybe wouldn't have been quite as attractive as a postcard, right? So again, they were trying to sell the Grand Canyon, but they were also trying to sell the places that we stay. Right? And again, I found that in the imagery, this was very gratifying. I had archivists who were just wonderful, who also started to look at this imagery with me, and they eventually helped me find this documentation that says, fake canyon view and window as per magazine illustration attached. They even called it fake, right? So they cut it out of a magazine, pasted it into a postcard, and made a different image. When we talk about these postcards, we're talking about a really edited document that's gone through this process of revising, reframing it, selecting objects and subjects for it, and it was really repetitive. And again, these were widely reproduced. So I want you to, just as we're starting to wrap up here, think about how these postcards, these photographs, and even today, the images that we take in many ways are not just innocent documents of what Richard Schein calls the built environment or sort of the buildings in the physical landscape. They are constructed places of constructed spaces, right? And in these images, you know, as I looked into one of the more popular postcards I was just showing you, we saw that the archival evidence reveals that people should be put back that were taken out. And this postcard, I'll show it to you again here, really also was weird and drove me kind of crazy. If you look closely in the middle here, you'll see this group of people looking at trees. Right, and that just for a long time I couldn't figure out why are they just standing there looking at trees, and then eventually I found, again with help of wonderful archivists and museum folks, that there were people who were staying there who were waiting for a tour to take off, and that was part of it, right? And in the postcard or in the book, I actually point out these things to you so you can see it a little bit more clearly, the differences of not only color but these locations, right? So to conclude, thinking about where is the Grand Canyon, I remind you again of that newspaper article I started off with in that search for authenticity, which is really one of the things that I took away from this article. It was not just this fight between should you go visit the National Park Service part of the Grand Canyon or should you go to visit the Hualapai area and the walk. It's really between the north and the south rims as well, and really all parts of the Grand Canyon. Some of the more modern day postcards alluded to this sort of multiplicity of the Grand Canyon. And here we have one of them where it's a pastiche. If you can make it out, the illustrator added everything from the desert view to the Colorado River, some lightning for the heck of it, I guess, and the interior here. And they kind of put everything into the Grand Canyon, that multiplicity. Over the course of my book, I trace, again, 153 years, all the way from those early river runners and explorers through that popular tourism and early tourism era into the present day. And to leave you with the sort of takeaway message of this, again, we're talking about a really large area. If we talk about just the national park, which I'm talking about someplace bigger, but if we talk about the national park, 1.2 million acres. I've already emphasized that we're talking about 153 years of imagery, over 1,000 images, and yet I can tell you because I looked at thousands of images, that really what we've been seeing for all this time is just a handful of images, maybe 5 places, and I've gone to those places, reproduced over and over again, and almost all those places are showing us standing at the rim of the canyon and looking across the canyon and seeing something similar to this view that we saw earlier with the water and the Colorado River. So how we frame the Grand Canyon matters. What we put in our viewfinders matters. It shapes our environmental perceptions, our park management and policies, the way we experience and live in this place, right? So finally, just to think about it, when we look to the future of the Grand Canyon, environmentally sustainable and resilient future requires that sort of larger regional context, I think, thinking beyond not just the national park, but beyond those boundaries to the greater Grand Canyon region. I think seeing the Grand Canyon and how we see the Grand Canyon, quite frankly, where we see the Grand Canyon is very important to what we consider and what we want to protect. And then understanding the Grand Canyon as a multicultural place. It has been in the past, it is now, and it will be in the future. And recognizing that multiplicity of cultures that have strong connections to the canyon is a very important topic. All right, so I'll wrap up there. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. I look forward to your questions. Thank you. Hey. I know some of you need to leave for classes. Thank you all for coming. Those of you, if you want to stay, if anybody has questions for me, I'm happy to take some questions. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm wondering how you chose the image you put on the book cover.
Oh, on the cover of the book?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I would give a shout out to my publisher, University of Nebraska Press, which is a fabulous publisher, and that came from their graphic arts team that created that image after much discussion. So again, a wonderful press. As a book author, and perhaps you know this, you often don't get a chance to choose your cover. The book appears to you after all these years. And because my book had so much to do with visuals and imagery, I said, hey, if you don't mind, can I just send you a few ideas? And I made them compact. I said, try this or this, but please don't put any historical imagery on it because, again, like I said, I really wanted this book to be for the public as well as scholars. So I wanted a cover that could sit in a national park bookstore and at least get someone to touch it, and pick it up, maybe buy it, but I wanted that. And so through that process, their amazing graphic arts team came up with a couple versions for me to look at, and that was the one that won. Hands down. It was beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for your question. Other folks? Yes, ma'am. And then I'll come to you, sir.
Do you have any goals for this book and what you found in terms of conservation or any specifics?
Yeah. Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, I do. I teach conservation natural resources, and I bring parts of this book into my classroom for my students to think about. Yeah, thank you. Postcards and stickers here. Oh, and postcards and stickers too. That was a great question about the book cover. You should get some book cover copies. Yeah. Yeah, specifically, that section that I was talking about, the management and maybe those implications. This is a project that's collaboratively done with the National Park Service, Grand Canyon Association. So, I've been working with them the whole time and giving them this result. And I hope that maybe thinking about the images a little bit more critically that are put in like park newspapers and on park interpretive boards. But also I hope through doing these kind of talks that I get people to think about what we're putting in our viewfinders. And really importantly for, students is, or anyone, but, what we post on our social feeds. Of the canyon and what parts of the canyon in terms of if you show that image and certainly if you geotag it, that's going to increase people coming to that site. Is it a sensitive site that we're trying to protect? So maybe we don't want so many people walking there because then we're going to have bathrooms and facilities and all that stuff. Or is it a place that you want to show off and say, wow, this is a beautiful fern grotto at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I want you to know about this incredible experience. And that would help people maybe protect it, And that was one of the things that, many things I took from floating through the Grand Canyon for 3 weeks. And I'm a former river guide, so honestly, it comes from the bottom of the river. But there's so many beautiful, not only waterfalls, but fern grottos down there that just most beautiful, delicate ferns that a lot of people don't know about. But if you go down there, they touch you. In a way that you want to protect them. So yeah, those kind of things of thinking about our images and how they might be connected to how that canyon is managed. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah, great. Yes, sir.
You mentioned Fred Harvey, but you didn't say anything about Union Pacific or the Utah Parks Company.
Of course I did. Well, and here we are, thinking about northern, the influence from the north rim of the canyon. I didn't, mostly because, I'm limited on time here, but now I've got lots of time to talk, right? We've got these keynotes. Those are, and postcards and stickers as well for you too. Those are, of course, major influencers for the north rim of the canyon in terms of the Union Pacific getting visitors to the north rim of the canyon and thinking about the lodge of the facilities, many of which we lost this summer with a really horrible fire. But those companies and Union Pacific appear in the postcard imagery to a certain extent in Arizona Highways, but Arizona Highways was appropriately enough really focused on the roads. And so, lots of pictures of bridges being built and dams being built and that sort of thing. Yeah. Does that answer your question or is there more?
I just wondered about it. My father worked for the Utah Parks Company, and I have a friend who was one of the managers with the Union Pacific, their bus operation.
Oh, cool. That's great. Well, those are great stories, I'm sure. Yeah, I'd love to hear more of that. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, other folks, other questions? Yes, I mean, these are opportunities for postcards and stickers, right? We've got enough for the room here, so yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious. I know the scope of your book is the images and postcards. But have you played around or thought at all about incorporating like film and like film usage of the canyon?
Yeah, did you look at early versions of my book? Is that how this is really creepy? Yeah, no, I'm joking. No, the first version, I mentioned that I took a sabbatical and gutted a couple parts of this, but not gutted. I heavily revised a few chapters and really thought about my focus. And also I had colleagues read the manuscript and all that kind of good stuff. And the feedback I was getting from colleagues and other scholars was really focused on the postcards and the photographs. But the early version, and then, my editor, my very nice, you could see how thick this thing is. My very nice publisher also said, getting too big, right? So I had to cut something and I had to add other things in. So I had some tough choices. But I have other publications, if you're interested, that talk about the films. But the original thing had 3 films that I had selected that went with the different major time periods, and looking at where in the Grand Canyon those films were located, and of course what was shown in those films, right? And so my early film was the Cole brothers, who made the first movie, basically, of floating down the Grand Canyon. Very famous photographers from the South Rim that took this incredibly hazardous wooden boat journey down the Grand Canyon. But you could still, they've digitized that. Northern Arizona University has that great imagery. And then looking at that, and then I looked at a documentary that was sort of from the 80s, thinking about Colorado River conservation issues. And then I looked at a movie, oddly enough, with Steve Martin and a bunch of cast of characters called The Grand Canyon. Does anybody know this movie? No, it's not about the Grand Canyon. The whole thing is called Grand Canyon. If you look it up, you can look it up. Grand Canyon, and it's got this amazing cast of, like, they're all huge stars, but the whole thing takes place in Los Angeles. And it's basically talking about the Grand Canyon within us, like the depths of something that we are missing, or parts of our lives that are bigger than us, that kind of thing, right? And so it's not until like the last, I think, 5 minutes of the movie, they go to the Grand Canyon, stand on the rim, and they look at it, And I was like, of course they go and they stand on the rim and they look at the Grand Canyon, right? So I had those three films, and it was a thread that I kept through every chapter of all the books, or all the chapters. But then, I had to take something out and put something in, and it didn't happen. But there's really great stuff out there. And I mean, those are just the 3 I picked, right? There's lots of other things you could think about for the Grand Canyon. I'm just going to say this, you didn't ask this, but since I got it here for a moment, a few students are left, and faculty and other folks. Also one of the other things I talk about with this book is, this is what I just happen to look at. But, looking at, you could do this with the internet, imagery on the internet. You could do this with looking at Instagram feeds or Facebook or whatever, social media feeds. You could look at GPS tagged places and do like a heat map of where people go. I'm hoping this inspires, and this is part of the reason I do all these public talks, is I hope this inspires the next wave of students who are undergrads or graduates to do. They could take my methods and do some other type of material, And also, you could do this any place, right? You could do this Eiffel Tower, anything that's iconic. It has a lot of imagery with it, Yeah. Thank you. Did you get a postcard and sticker? Did you? Okay, good. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Silly question, but I don't, for somebody who doesn't love heights, and seeing your image of them really actually taking the mule head and monetizing it by superimposing it and making that a part of kind of the draw to sell the postcard and the draw to maybe get people there. Did you, in all of your research, find that there was evidence of it being a dangerous thing, but that it was kind of suppressed because they didn't want it to get out that there were accidents? Mule, like taking the mule, the mules down the mountain.
Yeah. So your question is, was it suppressed that taking a mule ride can be dangerous?
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking of?
Because
no, I mean, honestly, those mule rides do not have very many accidents. Most of the accidents at the canyon happen from people getting dehydrated through time. Like, it's not just now. There's just more people there dehydrating, pretty much. But dehydrating, getting too hot, so heat exhaustion, and then falling off the rim, quite frankly. A pretty good number of people, unfortunately, quite a few of them children, who just kind of start running and don't realize. But a lot of people who just want to see the canyon and be really excited about it, and so they go right up. They want to get that great picture, and then it crumbles, right? So those are far more. And I got to say, from hiking up and down the canyon multiple times, which I did, and a lot of times, if you're hiking up and down the canyon, the South Rim, you're hiking with the presence of mules, shall we say? I have a lot of mule stories, right? It's terrifying. Has anybody here been on a mule up or down the Grand Canyon? No, so I hike, I'm a whitewater rafter, I do lots of scary things. Not getting on a mule, not because it's not safe, but because imagine yourself, if you've been on a horse or or even if you haven't, just imagine you're up there, right? The trail's this big, right? And these mules go through incredible training. They go up and down the canyon, and because I would see them because I do night hikes when it was hot. They'd start at like 3 a.m. and they go up and down the canyon. They're carrying like mail and food and stuff down to Phantom Ranch and back up, right? So that's their training to get used to it. And they have a really good wrangler who takes them up and down. And then only after years do they actually get to take people, right? But imagine yourself sitting there, right? So it's a narrow trail. It goes straight. You could see the world. You could see your fate before you, right, in the canyon. And the mule who's been on this trail so many times, their head just goes and looks over here and then over here. And you're thinking if that head follows the body, right? And so, you're not going fast, you're going along, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, They don't do it. They really, their mules are incredibly safe, and the wranglers are incredibly skilled. But it's mostly people misjudging their toughness, and not drinking enough, not eating enough, getting too hot, overextending themselves, to the point that not only is there a search and rescue crew, but Grand Canyon is one of the few national parks in the United States that has a preventative search and rescue, PSAR crew, that are volunteers that basically walk up and down the trails just saying, hey, you have enough water? Do you have some sunscreen? Maybe put on a hat, and just kind of trying to get in there before an accident happens and talk to people. So yeah, that's where the danger comes from. I did a whole article on danger in national parks and looking at danger signs. So if this is of interest to you, I have a very gory article I can send you. Yeah. Great question there. Thank you. Postcard and sticker, for goodness sakes. And thank you all. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering, so I mean, currently the national parks are not getting very much funding. What would you maybe recommend as far as preserving these places when that funding is not coming in?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and definitely something that deserves postcards and stickers or whatever I've got left there. I've got more postcards too. Yeah, I mean, honestly, a couple different parts of that, but one of them is you and me and us. Like, I think this is a great time for the public to step up and watch out for these places too. So if you see someone who looks like they might be dehydrated or take a fall, maybe offer them some water or chat with them. Also, if you see someone looks like they're vandalizing or doing something they shouldn't be doing at a park, maybe ask them gently or try to intervene in some ways. And then really critically, because my book, critically think about the pictures you take now, and where you taking the pictures and have them in your album or your feed, whatever, but like what we post and what we text to our friends or how they share it, really think about the places that we're showing. And if you show something, talk about protecting it, in some way, because the parks are really having a tough time right now, and thank whoever's working, because it's volunteer work at this point. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Do you have a question in the back?
Oh, sorry.
Was that an itch? All right. That's all right. I mean, there's postcards and stickers to be had for that itch. All right.
Last one.
Yes, last one. Yes, sir.
I wondered if you could say more about the role that images may have played in the debates over whether to dam the Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, yeah. See, seriously. And I got stickers up here too. Yeah, that's a whole chapter. I call it, the chapter's called Canyon Be Damned, as in dams. Massive role in it. And really, Arizona highways, I bring in a little bit more for that discussion. I talk early on about the postcards, like I showed you here, in terms of how do we show the river, and then trying to sort of critically inform behind, like was the river dammed at that point, or what influence did it have on the ecology? But the Arizona highways stuff, like I said, I have a whole chapter here on it, and I've done another article on that too. Arizona highways was interesting because they were giving equal time to the engineers and the surveyors who were laying out the dams, basically, and creating the dams in some really tremendous photographs, like dramatically beautiful photographs. And at the same time, they were sending their photographers on river trips, which were in the early like commercial river rafting really came around after World War II. And so they were sending their photographers down with inflatable boats and dories and people who were hiking to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, taking pictures of families. And so, issue to issue, as I was going through, like each issue of the magazine would kind of go dam builders, river rafters and hikers, dam builders, river, and they would in their interviews and comments that they would use, it was clear they were kind of playing with, what do we want to do with this canyon? What are our experiences? How do we want to use it? And so that really came out, and a lot of that's in that chapter in there and throughout. But there's a big chapter on that one. Yeah, lots of really cool stuff. Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Let's give her a run.
Okay, thank you, folks. And thanks for sticking around for questions too. So thank you all so much, and thanks again for hosting me. It's really tremendous.